Some concrete reasons to consider Hegel a failure, taking his route to be illuminated in a way sufficient that we can dismiss it. The most clear-cut version of Hegel in a concrete way would be to say Hegel wants a constitutional monarchy with a big bureaucracy. So exactly what some part of the country is railing against right now, under the name of the inertia of the deep, or under the name of the deep state. But it's just otherwise thematized probably by people that are less conspiratorial or hotheads, I guess, as well, as the bureaucratic state. So to the extent Hegel has given a positive formula to his government, the constitutional monarchy with a big government service, or public servants who are totally trained and who have discipline, or phronesis, if you like, morality, a practice that not everyone can have. I like the example of the old Etonians from the around the year 1900 or so, the Lord Curzon, this kind of thing. Hegel must have been thinking of something a little bit like that, but more disciplined by his, not by the English public schools, but by, where public schools means the schools that prepared people to go into the rulership of the country. But which I think they were called that way because they were open to the talents at some times. In other words, they would say this equal opportunity. So this would mean that Hegel supposes that, so one, we have the end of history in this formula. There's the king, there's the constitution, there's the body of civil servants. That's probably the best name, clearest name for them. There's a body of civil servants, and these civil servants are trained in Hegel's system, in the full living out of his science. And maybe let me rephrase this one time. Actually, maybe the tightest view is to say rights of man and the citizen, something like that, is at the core, and thus also Hegel made his unfortunate remark in some ways, because it's misleading, that America is the country of the future, probably because, of course, America already promulgated these rights prior to the rights of man and the citizen, which, however, more impressed Hegel, and which he put at the center of his system along with the civil servants in their deep state. So then you could see how the end of history thesis, taken in the most straightforward way, has some problems. So, but I mean, first of all, obviously, why do we say Hegel? Well, Hegel has actually propounded this, but two, why philosophically is it the case? Because Hegel must understand himself to show up at the absolute moment when the historical process has brought about the final Geist. And the final Geist, then, we could understand as these are the principles you look up to. And this is the science that tells you how to understand that. And then you get some body of civil servants, which is like a real body of persons. So then there could be other versions. And then you say right-wing, left-wing Hegelians, but then you say Democrats, Republicans, and then you see it. I think that's so you could have this, you could see already Hegel's system isn't sufficient, because is it really that what is that the rhetoric is saying the real thing over against the deep state, blah, 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 we're for only elected officials. I think that's obviously nonsense. So what people are for is the officials that they like, that they basically excuse whenever they do anything bad, and that they think are opponents of the people that they don't like and always blame for everything. Um, so, I mean, that's the way human beings are on the whole. If you like somebody, then you're basically, even if you admit there's some flaws, you say that it's not. You laugh and you don't really take it seriously. And if you really consider Trump as on your side, then that's what you do. You just laugh whenever somebody criticizes him, or you just say, well, maybe, but we don't know, etc. Or you say, yeah, he does have these flaws, but after all, we can make use of. After all, they're not the worst things, and the way Steve Bannon talks like that, like we have to make use of Trump somehow because it's Trumpian moment. But only if you're Robert Reich or a Democrat would you say um, we can't celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of the American military because it happens to coincide with Trump's birthday. Therefore, we can't celebrate it because that would be a further slide into the totalitarianism. But so when you have these splits of this character, I think that's what's way more important than that you have a civil service or a deep bureaucracy. It's not the question of that it exists so much. It's the question of what's its character and do we trust it. So I think that's a strong um, sort of, I think it should boggle the mind of anyone who's like Zizek, who's trying to claim Hegel has said something definitive. No, there's something breaks in and shows that this doesn't really work. Now, you could say, what if there's a political party totally determined by being trained up in these boarding schools with only Hegel being taught, only Hegel's system and books approved by Hegel's system? There would be some big problems, like that Hegel didn't believe in evolution and positively denied that there is evolution. And so how much philosophical meaning does that have? You could probably get around it. But yeah, there'd be some big problems. So how does this put us then in position with our own time, and what does it mean that sort of we've inherited this bad Hegelian solution, which basically then degenerates into the belief in the unconscious. So Hegel thinks. So Hegel sort of shows the unconscious in a way prior to Freud. So that's probably why Zizek likes Hegel, because it said not all the Geist is us having a discussion and consciously thinking in the sense of dianoia or logos, speech, dialectic in the Socratic sense, trying to get dialogical advantage in a discussion in the Socratic sense, but there's also thinking in the material and in the atoms, in the invisible hand process. So this is basically, you could say, of course, obviously Freud shows it more clearly later by pointing to the fact that Plato probably deliberately goes away from this route in his discussion of what would the dreams of Athenian be like, and saying no, we have to stick with the rational side, the light, with what's lit by the logos. And you could say, so that's why, so that's an interesting route to see how at the same time what's universally accepted almost, the the findings of the field of anthropology, like we go here, we find all this type of, not just that some manners are different, but that the whole, what does it say in the Odyssey? The nous is different. So we have a totally different mind. But then, in addition to that, I think Kant, with his Handlung, pushes us to see also a totally different way of dealing pragmatically with things, of the understanding the pragma. I say that in order to not say behavior as though it were just a matter of... Behavior seems to put the emphasis on whether the thing is willed freely or not willed freely, rather than sort of the character of the understanding of the pragma or the environment. And then you notice that this notion of environment umwelt is like not it already brings in things that are questionable, and especially when you see it as in contrast with other ways of characterizing the immediate situation. So you see in Hegel already the first step to anthropology, rather than what anthropology used to mean, which was more like Platonic psychology, or the different understanding of the different types of human motivation and human beings, logos type, thumos type, bios type, into anthropology as we now understand it, which means at the same time the rational animal no longer is the main theme of study. So I think that's the clear way. I was trying to get at this in an earlier video. That's the clear way to understand it, is that first we have this breakdown of the rational animal view already before Hegel, and then from within that we get Descartes, and that sets up all these problems. And then the issue is, like, are all these problems still cogent when we look at them? Or was, I guess I'll end it this way. The one thing I would say, maybe there's kind of too much of a panic in connection to the discovery that we can't trust our senses, which the whole Cartesian thing is based on, basically. Because it's always known that you could. So the whole discussion happens, always known, I say, but the whole discussion happens on this ground where it's assumed that the senses can tell us things that reason can then explain to us, what the senses are misleading us. They're giving us a false impression of things. But then, I suppose maybe with the rainbow or something, I don't know. Do the senses actually suggest that there's a physical object there, and the mind tell us that there isn't, if we were to go there? I think that would be an example. But this, the modern example seems so shocking, which is that we, in California we have earthquakes, so you know what an earthquake is like. You know what it's like when the earth is moving, but we assume that the earth right now is not moving, because that's what our body is telling us, that's what the senses are telling us. But reason tells us otherwise. But that's such a massive thing that it then suggests that God is making riddles, rather than, in this Thomistic sense, setting things before us so that we can figure them out and solve things, and then have faith up above it as a matter of the ethical, perfecting our ethical natures more than anything else, I think. it's a, a view then um, that the senses are totally useless. That's behind Descartes um, uh, showing with the mind with an argument that the object of physics, the extended substance, is secure. It's supposed to be secure on a mental basis rather than because of any physical evidence for Descartes. That's the point of the extended substance and all the arguments he gives. Whereas the other argument again about um, the pronoun-bearing entity, the I that cognizes, is then about the things that could possibly turn out to be misleading, as the fact that we're not moving, or as the fact that some people see in color, some people see in black and white, and other things of that kind. So it seems like those critiques are valid. Maybe it's not just a panic, but then the question is, how much should we rely on? It's not really how much should we rely on it. It's just that, is there a valid question of a reality beside from this? And I think Heidegger goes more to saying there's no expectation of something like a reality. There has to be, we have to get it from the datum that's given us, as it were. Otherwise, we're building epicycles or whatever. So then I think there's a vested dispute then between Heidegger, who says, okay, I accept sort of this super skepticism because it brings me back to the Aragnus, the real datum, as it were. Whereas Strauss says, no, you could look at how Hegel, who's brought us into this situation or played a big role in it, is saying these things that are basically we can't accept. And his concrete vision of the principles of the French Revolution, rights of man and the citizen, are, we can't accept them. And it doesn't. His system just doesn't work concretely. That, I think, something that plays some role in Strauss's view. If once you catch sight of what Hegel's actually saying, then you have to realize that it's not the real thing, and therefore Hegel Hegel could show us many things in many respects, but he can't be taken as having given us the what he claimed to give us, which would be the dimension in which the most serious problems of people are to be solved, because basically he's putting that on a dimension that in direct politics plays out in this type of deep state versus bureaucracy. To how many cultures could run this deep state bureaucracy, and what would that be like? And then, of course, I realize, of course, the people that are pushing for different reasons, people claim to be more libertarian, but a lot of that is, I don't know, there's like a 19th century romanticism, as though everybody could live out in the self-sufficient in the, as Lincoln still thought in his talk to the agricultural society in Milwaukee, I think, is like everybody can expect not to be a wage slave through the remainder of, through most of their life. Lincoln said they can expect to become free and to work for themselves. But that would just basically mean, for the most part, like a homesteader or something. But basically, most of the people that claim to be for that, what they really think of is being wealthy and having, an estate in the middle of nowhere that's supplied by the global supply chain. they don't think of living in a log cabin in the wilderness. They may to some extent, but I think that's not really where their heart is. And the other side would be the accelerationists like Thiel and to extent Musk, where yes, we could totally get rid of the bureaucracy and basically have rule by him, by Musk, who's sort of like a to an extent, like I think it's like a song, he's a song and dance man, because it's Barnum and Bailey, but stirring up money towards different projects. But he makes them seem exciting. Oh, let's go to Mars and so on. But on the other hand, you have to say Starlink is very successful in real terms, and it's like, yeah, he's stirring up things in a certain direction, and then occasionally something hits really big, like almost like unicorn style within all these teams of people he's putting together. So it's kind of hard to. It's not exactly a Ponzi scheme, but that's how the markets work on the whole. I guess that's the end of that way. Musk is a nice sort of image, tableau vivant, let's say. If you follow him in his career and the way he moves funds around and gets people to invest in things, that's a nice vision of what, I don't know, it's like around 1890 or something, the guy wrote the book Lombard Street. That's what he's saying capitalism is, basically, is that this, whatever venture there is, it can move resources towards it, and nothing will go unfunded, no matter how stupid. And so vast efforts and lives are being expended, but you always see some unicorns. You always see some grand result. That's in a certain way that sparkle in the heart of the diamond of capitalism.